This is the London Fintech Podcast, brought to you by your host, Mike Ballerman, bridging the worlds of suits and t-shirts, of finance and technology, bringing you insights, stories, and inspiration from the golden age of opportunity and innovation happening in London right now.
Hi, this is Mike Ballerman, and this is London Fintech Podcast, episode 124, brought to you in association with Smart Pension, and I'm delighted to be joined today by Ruzbeh Bacha, founder of personalised news aggregator / filter, CityFalcon, to discuss the easily underestimated topic of the challenges of being an entrepreneur. Media narratives are of some startups, achieving amazing success with amazing amounts of work. Well, the amazing amounts of work apply to them all, success or failure. But the super-duper successes are perhaps less than 1%. And, like restaurants, most startups fail, but one never gets to hear of those. In between the great triumphs, of which we heard last week with Will, who co-founded Smart Pension and Arena Flowers, and the failures is a large limbo land. The reality, the realpolitik, is that for the majority of fintechs that started, say, 5 years ago and are still going, they have scored some successes, otherwise they wouldn't be here. But rather like swimming in a gloopy soup, there is much friction along the way, be it the crazy time that it takes to raise funds, every year being the rough rule of thumb, or crazily long purchase processes or buying decisions for big cos, or even with app banks that boast millions of users, and so get into tech print as being, quotes, worth, unquotes, billions, the difficulty of actually doing the making money thing. Actually, the swimming through soup describes all startups on the road to success. Witness Will's joke last time about the fact he had hair when he started his first company. Even if your road to success is shorter than your neighbours, it's still the same road of soup. Note to self, I wonder where I've got this recent penchant for mixed metaphors from. Ruzbeh was last on the show some 3 years ago, having formed CityFalcon in the archetypal bedroom way a couple of years before that. In the 5 years, they've scored some impressive clients and growth. However, one thing that's always defined Ruzbeh is his honesty about the soup road. He has written much over the years about the realpolitik of being an entrepreneur. It's easy to say, winners never quit and quitters never win. But just like those cross-country runs at school, it's not so easy to keep going when the rain's in your face and you're doubled up with a stitch. For those of you who would one day want to found their own startup, this map of the territory will be essential. For those of you on the journey and in the limbo between great success and spectacular failure, you can at least compare notes with a fellow comrade. For those of you in cushy jobs, you can turn up the heating, make another cup of tea, and give thanks that you have a nice warm office. Mind you, given that the average employee these days will have a dozen jobs, you'll have to be keeping half an eye on the next one. Plenty to talk about, so let's get on with the show and on to the soup road. Hi Ruzbeh, thank you for joining me today.
My pleasure to be back on the show again.
So in terms of the intro chit-chat and the kind of creative talents that I think is required to have a startup or a fintech startup these days, you were telling me that there's a kind of professional aspect to your dancing and that you've raised money by dancing, which is probably the first guest who's done that, to my knowledge anyway.
Yeah, it's something that I never expected. In the few rounds that we've done, what has been interesting is the people who support you. And these are just not necessarily from where you worked or, any of the other professional associations, but strangely, Salsa. So, I've been dancing for a long, long time, maybe 15 years now. And a few of the ladies that I met on the dance floor ended up becoming investors in the company, which was amazing.
And this is presumably due to the quality of your dancing or the quality of your charm or the quality of CityFalcon, or all three together. It's probably the best answer, isn't it?
I guess those things help. I think social media has helped a lot. So I think as you kind of get to meet people, they keep a track of what's going on the professional front, on the personal front. And I think, as you know, investing is not just about investing in ideas, but it's about investing in people. Right? It's people you trust, it's the relationships you build.
Yes, I got all that. Just fascinated by the idea that you can be such a good dancer, and that in itself brings in the funds. And I'm generally glad that this isn't a video podcast, because video podcasts take roughly 10 times the effort to get out as audio ones do. But I'm also at this point sad because we could actually make it the most interesting podcast so far by having little sort of, you could salsa around the room and I could video you, see, at which point, no doubt, more money would flow into CityFalcon. Excellent. Right, okay, that's certainly a unique story. So maybe we just dive into the main course then. I mentioned it very briefly in passing, and for those people without total recall of every episode we've ever done, as it was several years ago, I said that CityFalcon is a personalised news aggregator / filter. What's one of them in reality?
So from where we started to where we are, our focus is essentially converting unstructured financial data into structured content which then can be accessed by people trading, investing in the stock markets, or you kind of staying at work, you want to manage knowledge about sectors, about the areas you work in, and all of that. So essentially what we're doing is we're helping you power your decision making, and to that we leverage natural language processing and machine learning to give you the product.
So basically, if I'm interested in, investing in tech companies or trading in tech companies just personally, just for a laugh, because I can't do Salsa, then I can either read 1 million news articles a day to keep up with it and get very confused, or presumably I go to CityFalcon and you give me the top 10 or top 20 or something like that.
It's exactly that. So if you're looking for just relevant, key information for the day or for the week, we can give you those stories. On the other hand, if you're a frequent trader or if you're someone who's constantly reading news as it comes out, then you also have the real-time aspect of this.
Interesting. Okay, well, look, we'll come on to CityFalcon later because it is the information age, and as roughly everybody has noticed, one good thing is there's lots of readily available information out there. One bad thing is that it's a complete tsunami. If you're after a teaspoon of the relevant stuff, it takes you quite a long time to get the relevant molecules. Okay, so we'll put CityFalcon to one side. So let's just talk sort of more generically. I think people know it's tough being an entrepreneur. I think people who haven't done anything can never know how tough that is. So coming back to cross-country runs at school, if you never had to do the awful cross-country runs that I did at school, you don't know how tough they are. Or talking to one of the older guests recently who did the Marathon des Sables, where you keep doing loads of marathons across the Sahara, I can say, oh yeah, I know what that's like. But I don't know what that's like until you actually do it. Now, you've been doing it for 5 years, so would you like to, in some way, split the various dimensions of the challenges down and give people a feel, as much as you can convey a feel, of what it's like living on Mars, as it were?
Yeah, it's completely different from what I expected it to be before I started. So essentially my knowledge was from books and reading media, and it's a completely different thing.
So the first point there is the gap between perception and reality. Where does the perception come from then? So if people are listening to this and they haven't formed a company themselves, but one day they get fed up and they think, I'd like to have my own company, how hard can it be? Where will they have got their perception from about how easy, how hard, or what it's actually like?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think a lot of it could come from the education side of things. Maybe you've done your MBA, maybe you've done some courses online, and obviously the other part is the media.
The MBAs and courses cover the kind of realpolitik. A lot of the textbooks I've seen, or people I know that have done these things, it's very textbook, it's very sort of kind of school learning. You don't really have a module where it says, oh God, it's really shit, and you wake up and can't sleep for weeks on end, or maybe they do, the better courses, I don't know.
Yeah, so obviously having done my MBA, we've done, on entrepreneurship. There are case studies that help, but it's just not like the real thing, essentially. And so a broader point on also the media side of things is like what you read on a daily basis. It's mainly the successes. So, what I kind of think about is the unspoken 95%. There's a lot of focus on some companies. You talk about unicorns, you talk about the big fundraisers, but what about the companies that are, struggling, or the companies maybe they become cash flow positive without raising tens of millions of pounds in funding, but completely ignored by the media today.
Yes, and the media itself is a big topic that I've flogged to death, I think, in the past 2 or 3 New Year specials, and I don't want to flog it again because it's very annoying. Actually, it occurred to me recently, I was wondering why I keep mentioning the media in the New Year specials when I can talk about anything. But actually, to this point that it is the information age, then the media has got even more importance than it used to have, and I'm including social media in this as well, going back to the point you mentioned. Because where do we get our information about everything? From the media. We've just flown back from India. Where do I get my information from India? I haven't been there. I get it from the media or from books. So how they filter the world, or how they represent the world, or the perception deception, as David Icke calls it, is super important, because increasingly, obviously in political perspective, America's a prime example, the media no longer actually just reports on the news. It's a kind of political party in its own right, lobbying for certain perspectives. Given the economics of it, one problem I think on the startups, or actually business in general, the FT is not what it was 30 years ago, is because their economics is poorer, they can't afford people with enough experience. They don't have somebody like me with 30 odd years of experience writing articles about startups. They have some poor kid, aged 22, 23, that recycles a press release because that's the only thing they can do economically. And as you say then, this company raised 500 million. That's easy to write about, with a valuation of X. The quantity they raise gets mentioned, but just to that point, another dimension of what you're talking about is that the quality of the raise never gets mentioned because they've got no understanding. And by quality of the raise, I mean how much you've had to concede to get the money. And I'm not just talking about percentage of the company, I'm talking about huge terms and conditions which come back to bite people. So the media is definitely a problem, and they distort by definition. I think it's always been a problem insofar as I was remembering the other day that Lord Beaverbrook, who was very influential media baron in the early mid-20th century. His advice to his journalist was, I want people that read your articles to come away either angry or fearful. And there's certainly a lot of that at the moment. I mean, hate bait is a big thing.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think just to add in terms of the media, for the startup media in specific, I think what I see is that apart from the ability of skills, is people are lazy today, right? People are looking for a proxy for be it success or be it how good the product is. So no one's actually investing the time looking at products, going out, saying, if you focus on a particular sector, what the startups are actually doing. And so not only does it affect the company, but it also affects how investors, employees of your company look at your company. So to give you an example, when my strategy with my company is to avoid taking big amounts of money, right? Stay lean, become profitable quickly, and build a sustainable company, right? I do not want to be 1 out of 10 companies in a VC's portfolio, which is allowed to fail as long as some of the other companies succeed. And what the challenge creates is my investors could be asking me, hey, I see companies which started 3 years back and now worth, a couple of $1 billion, while you're still struggling, quotes unquote, because you're not at that level of valuation. And that is quite challenging. Also on the employee front, right? Why are their stock options not going up faster like what they see in the media? And these are the challenges we have to face.
So then the question is, how in the ideal world would they be addressed? Let's put the media to one side. To the point about expectations and how this is handled in mature markets. I don't, of course, have the statistics, but my feeling would be that you have been significantly better than the median fintech that was formed 5 years ago in your cohort. In the grown-up world of investment, you have things like the FTSE index or the Dow Jones index or something like that. So in an ideal world, there would be some index of fintech performance somehow. If only that, let's say, in London 5 years ago when you were formed, there were 247 fintech started, of which now 147 are dead. Then you get an idea of the spread of the market, because otherwise, as you say, people will tend just to compare you to the best thing going, which is a bit like taking a football team and saying, you're not Manchester United. No, but I am sort of in the first division, not the fourth. How do you think that could ever be addressed?
So, going back to your point earlier, which is it's all about the economics, right? What you need is someone to actually take the time to plan and create an index. I think that's a great idea, right? A fintech index that looks beyond just the big companies and just the big failures, things that can be looked upon in detail and kind of give the real feel of running a company. It's not as glamorous as they show you in the media. It's not as bad as they show you with, what you saw on the Netflix on Fire Festival or, a lot of the other documentaries that are coming out.
Okay, so the point here is about perceptions, which is that your perception of being an entrepreneur before you did it was very different. I think that tends to apply to every experience in life. Like Marathon des Sables being an example. I might think it's going to be tiring. It is, but I have no idea how tiring. And the media and books in general, which provide, or films as well, provide, and podcasts, which provide people with information about parts of the world, and I'm being metaphorical here, that they haven't experienced what it's like, and there's a gap between that, and it sounds like really in a proper capitalism, if there's a gap in the market, there should be some way of filling it. Now, to an extent, podcasts like this are, because I do 124 long-form conversations with people. For anybody that cares to listen, they get around 40 minutes conversation, and it helps them to build up a picture. The problem with that is that you need to invest the time to listen to it. And as you say, in a world of sort of Twitters or something, let's look at a million tiny bites of information. I mean, in the alternative media space, Quillette has done extremely well in terms of being grown-up people writing about grown-up topics in a non-hysterical fashion. But it's very long-form stuff, so a 5,000-word essay or something on important topics. And I have to admit, most of the times I click onto one of those articles, I never quite finish it. So in a sense, it's more fool us. I mean, coming back to your role in helping curate the information age for people, let's say you did a customized job and I turn up at CityFalcon tomorrow as a customer. So I've got lots of money. I'll give you $1 million and this is what I want. Well, I want a suit made like this. I'm sure you could do it, especially for $1 million. But it's not just like a suit where I put it on, it takes 2 minutes to put it on. I've then got to, let's say in this case, I've then got to spend an hour a day reading 20,000 words on something. So it's not just a fault of the producers, it's a fault of the consumers is kind of what I'm saying.
Yeah, I mean, that's fair. I think if you're going to invest 5 years of your life at least, that's what it takes to build a good startup, then it's worthwhile for you to invest that time. I mean, if it's just a hobby, if you just want to know more about entrepreneurship, I understand it's a lot of investment. But without actually understanding the realities from people who've done this before, I think people might be making wrong decisions in terms of at whatever stage they're in life, whether or not to build their own company or not.
Yes, absolutely. And going back to 5 years ago, I spent far too much time, quotes being kind, 5 years ago, giving loads of new startup founders and CEOs advice for free, and people saying on coffee, and I'd generally meet up. And most of that was a waste of time. Most of that I felt from a paternal perspective, oh my God, this kid's going to fuck up because they just haven't got it. So if you were to choose one or two dimensions, what were the biggest differences between the reality of doing it and your expectation beforehand?
The expectation was around kind of moving very quickly in terms of, how you raise funds, how the valuation increases, how your team grows, and how, it's like a movie condensed into, 1.5 hours essentially. But in reality, it's much tougher. The reality, there are times where you think to yourself, are you doing the right thing? Should you continue? Maybe the opportunity cost is so big that you could be sitting in a salaried job, which is, with steady cash flows. And so the reality is very, very different. And I think a lot of the times what could make a difference between a business being successful or not is the ability of the entrepreneur to go on, right? I mean, we've seen real cases where entrepreneurs have given up even after being a cash flow positive startup. It was just, your life is short, you don't want to spend all your life doing this if it doesn't make you happy, if it makes you really stressful. I think that's the real learning. In our case at CityFalcon, we're lucky with the fundraising we've had. For now, what we have a runway of 2 years. But before that, I didn't have that. I had a 6 months runway every time, and then I had to prove ourselves at each funding round to actually get more money.
Yes, which is very time-consuming. And in terms of, as you say, and all entrepreneurs have had this, no matter how successful their company, as it were, waking up at 4 o'clock in the morning thinking, oh my God, what am I doing this for? It's miserable. I'm reminded of a line from an early Cure album, there's nothing left but faith. And in a sense, it can simply be faith, which keeps you going. Even if it was 10 years' time, in 10 years' time, you're astronomical, you're the biggest one in the world. Well, it was only somehow this faith, whatever faith is, we don't know, that actually kept you going and produced the results.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree with you. Also, what really helps me is that every day in the morning or every time I deal with something in financial services, which is broken, that excites me more about the opportunity, especially as we look at machine learning, natural language processing that we focus on.
Yes, so clearly one of the things that's essential to be an entrepreneur is complete madness as well as faith. So as you say about the funding, that's obviously one of the dimensions that I've experienced indirectly speaking to everybody, and actually I should be doing more myself because I should be making an effort to go out there and get some brand partners for this year. I just simply haven't had the time. In passing, quick shout out to the audience. If you want to be super successful, then give me a call. Smart Pension are the largest private provider in the UK. Certainly helped them. Blue Motor Finance, I saw, FT said they're the fastest growing company in Europe last year, so it certainly helped them. Anyway, so the funding. I haven't met anybody, any of the people I've spoken to, for whom it hasn't been a bloody nightmare that took bloody ages.
Yeah, and then again, it goes back to kind of what people believe funding is and how easy it is given companies are raising 200 million in funding. But the reality is that if you want to try it out on your friends. Ask them for 5, 20, 50 quid. And how many people actually support you with that, even though they might be, closest friends. And now, with funding, you have to actually go to strangers, right? And which is the challenge. So when you look at, for example, we had a very successful crowdfunding campaign on Cedars, right? So we raised £700,000 when initially I started off with only 50,000 in confirmed kind of pledges with what we're looking at. And people look at it and say, oh, 1 month successful, there's a lot of money, blah, blah, blah. But what I look at it is, it was a lifelong of building relationships. It was the last 5 years that me going out, the company being out there, finding kind of the tribe, on social media, whatever, that actually helped us close this round in 1 month. And these are the things that, again, it's difficult for people to know. I remember a funny thing which I did. I did a grant application. I won't tell you to who, but one of the governments, and they gave me feedback saying, okay, this works, this doesn't work, blah, blah, blah. And in the end, the sentence said, hey, but you're a fintech, you will raise money anyway, right? Why do you need a grant? That was kind of an eye-opening moment at that point of time, which, having gone through that, we've kind of adapted our strategy. So as I said, we're not going to raise a lot of money. We want to focus on our cash burn. We want to focus on generating revenue. At this stage, I even believe that if you are a product startup, which is quite challenging, you could even fund your business with some services. So we are looking at, for example, supporting businesses with natural language processing. It's important we understand this space and we can do consulting in that area. Whatever it takes for us to reach that milestone of being cash flow positive and being self-sustainable.
Yes, which is a nice way of looking at it because that's a proper business. And I keep using the example of app banks because they're the most obvious and the most well-known, but you haven't got a business until you're making a profit. You can get 1 million clients and you can sell 1 million clients to Lloyds or something and they'll pay you for it, but that's built up an asset which you flog. It's not a business. It's like, let's say I go and I build a house. I've built a house, it's worth something. You might want to buy it from me. So I've created value, but I haven't created a business. A business would be, let's say I go and build a restaurant and I get customers coming in and they pay me more than the food costs.
Yeah. Just to kind of add also, and I'm very honest about and transparent about this, I think the VC model is broken. It doesn't work. I mean, imagine you're deploying so much capital with such limited startups. Imagine if you open up that capital for a much wider base of startups, right? I mean, I almost think with the way VCs work and with the checklist approach, how about a VC which is backed by AI, which is kind of clearly going through that checklist, but then you don't have the high cost of running a VC?
Yes, I was thinking coming in this morning actually about the problem with VCs is they've kind of got a near monopoly in the market because you can find yourself in non-VC way some fintechs have managed. And as we know, Diane Mulcahy, Harvard Business Review wrote the canonical article, VCs are well paid to lose money. The average VC in the greatest tech boom ever in the States has not returned to the investors the funds they took off them in the first place, let alone got any positive return. And to this point about this sort of unicorn hunting, and you say the VCs have a portfolio of 10 and don't give a monkey's about 9 as long as one of them is going to be super successful. It would be interesting to see how that could be amended. I'm sceptical about the AI. I'm not saying it wouldn't work, but to the extent that their processes get more and more mechanical, yes, they could be replicated by a computer. However, to the point of poor performance, though, their processes are not very good processes. So that's a challenge. And you mentioned seeders, so your 700,000, which sounded like a nice sum of money to me, was that all crowd or some VC or mixture? I mean, how was your funding experience?
All angel investors, and so anyone putting from £10 to tens of thousands of pounds. A lot of these people were either from a client side or a user side, and then a lot of relationships that we've built over a period of time.
Okay, so in which case you're a bit like the Beatles in that you spent years before you become famous actually just doing the hard grind, although in your case, but not mix the word grind and dancing, because that's not how salsa works. So I think salsa's a bit along that direction compared to waltzing. Right, okay, so look, so that's the funding. You've either got to go down the sort of the VC roadshow thing, which is hard work, but if you're lucky, comes out that loads of money, or you do the crowdfunding, and I think you've made the point very well, which is that one of the naive mistakes that people who didn't understand it do is they turn up, know nobody, stick themselves on Seedrs or Crowdcube, and then wait for the money to flood in. It doesn't work like that.
It doesn't.
As you say, if you can't get a mate to give you 100 quid, why should somebody who's never heard of you in their entire life give it on the basis of reading a couple of paragraphs and a nice little video?
It's exactly that. Completely agree with you.
So you mentioned products, services. We've also got the B2B, B2C. If we consider this in a sort of typical, you mentioned MBA, typical MBA 4-quadrant map. So, at the top horizontal, we've got product, the lower horizontal, we've got service. On the left hand, we've got B2B, and the right, B2C. We've got these 4 dimensions. On the show last time, Will was talking about the fact that in the UK, Smart Pension provide a service, auto-enrolment pensions, but actually elsewhere in other markets, they have productized their service, and they're selling that as a product to a partner who will essentially white label it or various other things. So there isn't necessarily a conflict between being a product or a service. And as you say, there can be a symbiosis. But how does this kind of map work out? Product, service, and then along the other dimension, B2B, B2C?
I mean, I think with any kind of product play, and we are a product play, what it requires is a lot of upfront investment, which might mean a lot of cash burn. That creates its own challenges because what everyone expects is, as you said, for running a business, it's about profitability, it's about proxies of profit. It could be revenue or it could be users or usage. And that's a tough one to get initially with a product business. While with a service business, obviously, you're getting the money upfront, or not upfront, but at least much faster than in a product business. Obviously, scalability and all of those issues remain. And so rethinking our model of how I could have done this business differently is I would have not been a completely product company. The risks involved are super high.
Yes, absolutely. My first incarnation was in a tech startup in Bath. I joined 83 when I was number 12 in the company. 18 months later when I left, I was number 55. Grew extremely rapidly. It was set up by some people from universities, but also from Logica VTS in Swindon. The guy at Logica VTS in Swindon had run product business before. He said, I am never doing that again ever in my life. Precisely because, as you say, and at the moment, as listeners will be bored of hearing, I'm still writing my bloody book. It's going on for 2 years now. I mean, full-time apart from the podcast, and actually I work too long. So that is a product in a sense. But actually, even that isn't really a product because it's something you can buy. And that's not a point, but nobody makes money from it. So really what I'm doing is I'm just gathering an enormous knowledge and information base, going back to the information age. It will be expressed in the book, so anybody, including strangers on the other side of the world, can buy it and read the book. But actually, I need to productize the product at that point because I need to turn it into something, I don't know, let's say for the sake of argument, board reviews or something. I come and review your board for a day or a week, a month or something like that. And so I need to productize the product. So very conscious myself, and I did the same thing 20 years ago, very conscious myself. It's a bit like if you work in the city and they're knocking the building down next to you, they'll spend years digging an empty hole, which is costing loads of money, and they can never sell that empty hole. And then suddenly the building goes up and then things change. So interesting. So you're making the same point that Will made a couple of weeks ago, which is that don't see it as product versus service. It can be a service funds a product. It can be your thing, can be seen from one side of the coin as a product, the other side as a service.
Absolutely. And again, what model you can follow depends on, again, where your funding comes from, who your stakeholders are. And I think the more freedom you have, you can experiment with these models. Even for me, from what you just mentioned, I don't think I can do another product startup again.
Well, that's what I mean.
Yes.
People who have done it, people who have actually walked the red road, Native Americans expression, you walk the red road, you do it once.
Yeah, I mean, to give you an example, let's say we started, one of the biggest mistakes I've made this is when we launched the product, we said, hey, why don't we have sign in with LinkedIn, Facebook, Google? It's very easy to do. It was the biggest mistake we've ever done. Like imagine the changes that we've gone through, the social media websites changing their SDKs, or, okay, I've done a web platform, now I'm doing something on mobile, I'm doing something on Alexa, so I have to replicate that. Sometimes things stop working. And so you spend so much time just fixing a basic login process. And these are things I didn't expect I would be spending a lot of time on.
Yes, and I think that, going back to the media, that is because I strongly believe that tech is also misrepresented. Having first played with computers 40 years ago, I've got a little bit of experience in this, and especially in these hypey years, because all they want is ad clicks, hence the hate bait or the hype. That gets most attention. Hey, this is amazing gets attention, or hey, this is shit gets attention, or I'm going to really annoy you, and they don't care whether you like them or don't. And this is another topic entirely, and one day I must do a show on this, is that my perspective, my personal perspective, is that tech is quite crap compared to expectations, or rather, more formally, the efficiency of using computers is far, far lower than anybody ever imagined. Because of all these layers of technologies on top, and it's all constantly moving, and all these continuous rapid development. It all sounds great, but the reality is all companies in almost any sector have got a large IT department. They've got a large priesthood just to keep the whole bloody show on the road, So that's a different dimension. Let's not pile into that one. Tech is what it is, and you all have to work with it. But I can absolutely see at some point in the next, shall we say, 50 years, tech being refactored entirely. And in 50 years' time, it'd be a dance that easier. And they look back now at us like savages banging rocks together to get a few smocks, because there certainly could be done better. So picking up this B2B, B2C thing, again, people are very familiar with this, and most people will be in one or the other, or a few people will be in both. What's your realpolitik experience of what it's like, what it feels like doing the B2B stuff and B2C, because you do both?
Yeah, I mean, with B2B, I think the challenge, just like getting your first job, is to get your first big client. And I think that takes a long time. For us, it took a couple of years before, one of our big clients, a big bank, went into production. But once you have that credibility, I think things become easier. Once you understand the process of how decision-making works with big institution, it helps. I still believe that B2B is a very risky strategy, even though a lot of people talk about big checks. I think there's a lot of pressure on cost that the businesses are facing, the lead times, the bureaucracy, and this is where we just don't want to do B2B, so we combine with B2C as well. I mean, if you look at the most successful companies globally, you would see that most of them are kind of predominantly B2C, from anything from Facebook, or obviously there are cases like Microsoft, which kind of is a B2B2C or kind of B2B. But I think, again, just focusing on either B2B or B2C is not, I think, what I would do. I would combine the two.
Okay, so then the last thing then, wrapping up, perhaps comes under attitude. I mean, you mentioned the fact that, mixing all my metaphors again, the length of the soup road varies for companies. It's like your fate. The Greek fates sit there, and Ruzbeh starts as an entrepreneur, and they decide how long your road success will be, and they measure it out, and you never know, and you trudge down the road, and Will's there, and they measure his road out, and it might as well be fates doing that. One of the qualities of which you've mentioned already in terms of expectations is that one can start the thing as a sprint, and then one finds out it's a bloody marathon. And after you've run 800 metres or 1,500 metres at sprint pace, you're getting exhausted. You just want to collapse by the side of the road, but you've still got 26 miles to go. So how do you treat that thing?
Yeah, I mean, I think so. The first couple of years were quite difficult for me personally. As you said, I was looking at it as a sprint and trying to get a lot of things done. But then you do realize that if you want to go for the marathon, you need to really plan. And then I look back at, how do I plan my day, for example? So I do wake up very early in the morning because it allows me to try and go as close to inbox zero, which is difficult, before my team comes online. But there are other things where I've looked at saying, how do I increase my productivity? So for example, I stopped eating meat for a long time until I was fundraising, and I'm trying to go back to that. Stopped drinking alcohol for a long time. Again, everything changed during the last fundraising round, so I'm trying to get back to...
You want packets of cigarettes, pints of beer?
No. So essentially looking at, how do I increase my productivity during the day? How do I manage this growing team that we have, which is almost like running a family, pinging you for not only work-related problems, but it could be, personal issues that you have to deal with. And so essentially, if you do not take care of your mental health as an entrepreneur, it's unlikely you're going to succeed.
And physical health, as you're implying.
Absolutely, physical health, and in fact, if you look at, for example, it's Jeff Bezos when, he just started off and what he looks like now, it's different. I mean, as running a startup, what you do get is flexibility. I don't have to be in an office reporting to someone. So one of the decisions I made, and I think it has worked for me, is last year I stopped going to the gym and I moved to full-time yoga. So I joined a yoga studio where any time of the day where I feel stressed, I go do 1 hour of yoga and I can come back and try and focus on work again. In summary, I think as an entrepreneur, I think you treat your startup, at least I do, and I keep saying that, as a child, which has been given a less than 10% chance of succeeding. Now, what would you do as a parent to make sure that your child is successful, your child lives? And this is what we have to do, but first you have to take care of yourself to be able to make sure that your child survives.
Yes, I think it's a very painful but very accurate metaphor to sum it all up for those who haven't done it. For all the parents out there, you'll no doubt have had sleepless nights when a little baby's got a temperature or chucking up all over the place, or the doctors don't know what's wrong, and all this kind of thing. And as you say, you do whatever it takes. And from all the many entrepreneurs I've seen, it is all far harder than you might ever imagine, but a bit like going to the gym and lifting weights, that's actually what makes you stronger. Obstacles make you stronger, and that's why entrepreneurs get better. And a bit like women who have a challenge with childbirth the first time around, so they'd never do that again. A few years later, they think, oh, sure, let's have another one. And they do that again. And actually, you're talking about not forming product companies. I was smiling to myself because I was wondering, I thought, wow, I bet in 10 years' time he does it again. History removes the pain from the memory, doesn't it? But yes, absolutely. And I think implicit in what you're saying about making sure people get some downtime and that, it's kind of essential. Yep. So your yoga is the downtime. But actually, many of the best entrepreneurs I know basically do their emails 7 days a week and don't switch off and don't take enough holidays and that kind of thing. But your mileage may vary as a human being on this planet. But the most important thing is that you actually take stock of yourself, look yourself in the mirror and go, God, I'm turning into a complete bloody wreck. I can't run a marathon turning into a wreck. So, so maybe you cut down to 6 days a week email or whatever. But the most important thing for a business until it gets to scale, and that's quite some scale, even the most successful businesses still need their founders for quite a long time. The most important thing you can do for your business is to look after yourself. Now, as you rightly say, you have to do that as an entrepreneur. But if you're a parent of a baby, as all parents of babies know, you don't look after yourself. You deplete yourself a hell of a lot. That's where all the hair goes and all that kind of stuff. But there comes a certain period of time when the kids get to a certain age where you go, okay, look, I've got to balance the fact that I need to stay alive with the fact that they need to stay alive, and the same thing with the business. So before we wrap up the show, I'd like to thank all the listeners out there. Those of you who haven't formed your own company and are thinking about it, I hope we haven't put you off. I hope we have educated you. You do have to be crazy to do this, but just take a simple model. In life, there are sheep and there are goats, and by and large, that's sort of genetic more than anything else, or accident of fate. So some of you out there may be fated to be entrepreneurs. I hope we've given you a little bit of an insight, so at least you're going in with eyes a bit more wide open. All those in comfortable jobs, good luck to you. Keep your head down, and I hope it works out, because it is a simpler life. I'd also like to thank my brand partners to the podcast, Smart Pension, who are fast, secure and free. Check out their UK workplace pensions at autoenrollment.co.uk. So we haven't mentioned CityFalcon too much. Ruzbeh, for the dessert course, would you like just to sort of wrap up briefly with examples of your sort of B2B clients or B2C clients, and if there are any B2B people listening or B2C people listening in the audience, who should be checking you out this afternoon, and then tell us a little bit more about where CityFalcon's going and what you need more of.
Yeah, absolutely. So I mean, if you believe, knowledge is power, if you want to stay updated with what's going on in the financial, business, economic, political arena, we can help you with content. And this could be you as a consumer to read that content, or to work on different use cases for your clients, be it in wealth management, be it your Fintech company, trying to keep your clients engaged. So do check out cityfalcon.com. You can reach out to us. We can help you for that. Also, as I mentioned earlier, is because we're not going to take a lot of more money, we're looking at using our knowledge that we built for natural language processing, kind of going through all this content, curation, all of that to apply for different use cases. So if you have a use case where you can take advantage of our knowledge and we could make a little bit of money to fund our product business, we would welcome any of those opportunities.
And on the B2B side, you've got some prestigious clients, and I don't know whether they're all public.
Yeah, we work with, for example, BNP Paribas, the French bank. We just did a proof of concept with the Austrian bank, which is Raiffeisen Bank. We've got a few other under NDAs, but Asian banks. We work with Smart Karma in Singapore and a lot of other Fintech companies who are kind of redefining for anything from trading, investing, wealth management, all of that.
What kind of things do B2B clients get from you?
Yeah, so to give you an example, let's say you have an app which is transaction-based. So maybe an investment app where people can buy stocks, be it Apple or something else. Now, what we've seen with clients is they probably come back into your app when they need to trade. And when they need information, they might go to Yahoo Finance and Google Finance. Now imagine if you can bring some of that content within your app, which means that you can keep them engaged, you can send them alerts, you bring them more often within your app. That can help you increase your average revenue per user. It can also help you attract new clients with the feature richness of your application. And this is what we can help with. Also, we are launching a premium subscription come this May. And the idea is we want to remove this pain, which is when you go to a news site, you see a lot of advertising, you see a lot of clutter. Now imagine if I can give you all of that information that you need, but which loads in milliseconds. It's run through our NLP model without any advertising and clutter. So we're going to launch a premium subscription for consumers, and we've already signed partnerships with companies like Bloomberg, Fitch, News Cycle, and we are adding a few more. So our dream is to be the Spotify of financial content, and hopefully very soon.
Yes, and how many people are you now?
So we are around 35 people. We are recruiting more people, obviously developers, but at this stage what we've realized is that we've grown too quickly. And I'm looking back at the cultural issues of managing the team, also the stress that people are going through. So as I said, I don't have the pressure from my stakeholders to grow at a crazy rate, right? We want to build a sustainable business. And so we're looking back at that and cutting down on the fast growth that we're looking at.
Interesting. Right. Well, on that note, I've been absolutely kicking myself this week because I declared to Will that he'd beaten me in the Blur versus Oasis app bank thing, because several years ago I was pushing Monzo and he was pushing Revolut, and I said, okay, I lose. But I should have kept my mouth shut, because Revolut have had an absolute torrent of, it seems to me, a press campaign against them. There are all sorts of problems growing about them going up to 800 people. So at least you haven't got the problems of having grown to 800 people. A longer, harder road sounds challenging, but in a way it gives you more time to adjust things as they go along. The ones who fail would want to be where you are. But actually the ones with apparent spectacular success, that comes with apparent spectacular problems as well. So I think the answer is that, and it's a bit like my career, I've worked in all sizes of company, 1, 10, 100,000, 300,000 or whatever. There are always challenges at any of these scales, and I think the most important thing is that one's on the case and one's addressing them. And to put this into perspective, I think you have been very successful in the last 3 years. I think the fact that some are sort of spectacularly successful, apparently spectacularly successful, a number of those, and I hope it's not Revolut, as I have a Revolut card, don't lose all my money, are a bit like the story of Icarus flying too near the sun. If you go up too fast, your wings melt, and then you can come crashing down, and there have already been P2Ps who have gone bankrupt in the UK. So finishing off, the rose bushes that grow slowly and steadily tend to be the strongest ones. The ones that you plant, give them a ton of fertiliser, they shoot up massively, they succumb to some disease. So I think there is something in this old-fashioned thing about slow and steady is the best way. So coming back to media narratives at the beginning, it's sexy to write about some startup that's sort of gone from 0 to 6 million clients, and then to write attacking it sort of terribly left, right and centre, and things like Lending Club in the States and in China, and that's all very exciting. But I think there is an argument, Ruzbeh, that behind the scenes it is fintechs like you guys who are more archetypal, who are more representative of the success, who find it really hard, but as a result you get this slow, steady growth, which is what produces you with a rose bush which lasts for 10 or 20 years. So I very much hope that's the case for you. You're showing all the signs that it is so far, and I hope people listening to this have gone away with a slightly different feeling in their bones about whether they do or don't want to be an entrepreneur. There'll certainly be many people that resonate with all the topics you're talking about. So I wish you every success in the future.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Thanks for listening. If you have consulting, advisory/non-exec or media needs in the FS or fintech space, get in touch with me at mike@londonfintechpodcast.com.
could sit in a bend there all day, watching the firelight dance, watching the firelight dance. We could walk in the mountains before dawn, watching a happy moonrise, watching a happy moonrise. Come away from the city, with the tarmac so dead and the people so sad. Come away from the city, with the faces so grey, with the pain of the everyday. We are wild like the mountains and the trees. Can you see what I mean? Can you see what I mean? We fit in between the earth and the sky. Kiss the city goodbye, wave the city goodbye, wave the city goodbye. The city goodbye. Watch the firelight dance with me, 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 watch the firelight